Well, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll get started. We have a pretty small group live here, but just as a reminder, we're recording this, so that's going to be made available to everyone. I'm going to change my view. Well, welcome and thank you everyone for having a project to celebrate Arbor Week this year and participating in this program with us. We just have 1 hour today that we're going to do a quick overview of California Relief and the program, and then pass it over to Lynette and Abby to answer questions and talk about best practices in your regions for planting and caring for trees. So we are recording, so just so you know, if your camera's on or if you want to ask a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself for questions, but that will just be part of the recording. Or if you prefer, you can type it in the chat, and we'll save those questions until the end. And I think that's it from me. Oh, I was just going to say too, we'll stop recording at 2, but if there's any lingering questions after that, whenever we're done, I'm happy to stay on the call a little bit longer and chat with anyone. So that's that, and I'll pass it off to Cindy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Blaine with California Relief, and thank you very much for putting in grants for Arbor Week. I'm just going to give a quick overview for those of you who are new to us. Ken's been around for a long time, but Lisa, you're a new face. Electra, you've been around for a little bit longer. Oh, I'm seeing that we've got some other people on now that I click over. So California Relief has been around since 1989, when 10 of the urban forest groups in the state at the time said that they needed a group to pull them together for peer-to-peer learning. So in some senses, what you're doing today, by the way, is peer-to-peer learning. The questions that you ask will benefit other people after you see the presentation, as well as being a webinar of just general information. But we were brought together so that there was learning from each other, other educational opportunities, advocacy at the state capitol to seek funding through state funding sources like the Cal Fire Urban and Community Forestry Program. There's also other ways that we get funding through the state. There's funding available for urban forest through urban greening and affordable housing sustainable communities at this time. So we do that, and then we go get grants and we pass them on to you from the state. But in this case, with Arbor Week, we've also been seeking out grants from foundations and corporate foundations at this point. So that's how we were able to get the funding from Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric this year. We give the grants, and then we have the network where you can work together. You can come to our retreat. You guys are new as grantees, but we encourage you to join the network. There's just a form to fill out and a suggested dues rate. We have our retreat coming up in May, and that'll be a chance to see everybody else that's in the network and learn from them. So please consider that. And please enjoy the rest of the presentation. And I'm probably not going to be able to stay on today, so I'll drop off, okay?
Okay.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah. If ever you have a question about relief, you can always call me on my cell. It's on the website. All right. Take care.
Thank you. So yeah, as Cindy said, we do a number of different grants programs, and this one for Arbor Week this year is sponsored by Edison International and San Diego Gas and Electric. And they're partnering with us for their goals in community benefit and climate change, and therefore the goals they align with the goals of this program, which are to plant trees to benefit your communities and to help cool them and provide shade. So in your projects, when you're picking out trees and locations, that's one of our big priorities, is just where it can have the most benefit to the community and provide shade and cooling, especially in a lot of the hot areas that y'all live in. A big part of the grants, you will get, I said in the email, but I'll just refresh a little bit for all of you. You get a check now and then a check after your report is done. And other than that, we are pretty hands-off. We're available for questions along the way, but really it's up to you how you want to spend the money and what you want this project to look like. The report is going to ask you for photos, and that's a really important piece that we're looking for from you all, because that helps us pass pass those on to the sponsors and just generate a lot of excitement for this program to help it going for years to come. So in that sheet I sent you with some tips, one of the things I had there was photography best tips. So definitely take a look at that and help us get some great photos for the program. Another thing is the press. Sometimes it's a little bit intimidating to work with a press, but these are great opportunities to give it a try if you haven't, or if you already have existing press relationships, that's great. There's a lot of news in the world right now that's not as fun. And so these Arbor Week events are just a great opportunity for people looking for good news to share. So even though they're not going to be as big of events as usual, definitely give it a try and reaching out and getting coverage. And when you do that, also please remember to thank sponsors when you're talking with the press. And really, that's all I had. When we get to questions, you can ask me more questions about the program itself. And a lot of it is covered in that email. So take a look at that and yeah, let me know. So I'll pass it off to Amelia to talk about the main focus of this program, which is the trees.
Hi there, I'm Amelia Oliver and I'm a program manager at California Relief. And I started out in a small nonprofit with a small Arbor Week grant back when we first started working with California Relief. So yeah, I understand if you haven't done a project like this before, or if you're continuing to do them, that these small amounts of money without a lot of reporting or strings attached are great ways to build your program and let the community know about your projects. But I just wanted to say, one of my first projects that I worked on, one of our Arborist board members was helping me plan it, and his advice to me was to view a project like a sculptor would look at a piece of granite, that you're seeing but think big, think long range. What is this going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years? So these are all these small choices you make at the time of installation are really going to make the success of your project be there for the future. So things like your species, or whether there's irrigation or not, or trying to maximize community participation, which we have found to be one of the main ways to avoid vandalism. Is more people you have involved in the planting, the more awareness the community has, the less negativity you're going to have. What are some of the surrounding practices around the tree? Is it in a mowing area where there's going to be people coming through? Do these weed whackers around it? Is mulch available, or things you can do to protect it? These are all things that if you think about at the time that you're putting them in the ground and making your choices on what to spend your money on, that are really going to make or break a project in the long run. So I'm available for questions as well if you're having some trying to figure out what partners you need to get something in the ground, or some creative ways of using these funds. I'm happy to help with that. But when it gets to the species, as you know, I live in Sacramento, very different area than both San Diego and the San Bernardino area, and the LA area in general, and your area too over there, Ken. Those species are very specific and will depend even within those ranges. So we're really fortunate in California that we have the regional foresters, and they're much more versed and educated on those species. So having Abigail and Lynette is around the corner there, here to share with us some information on that is really great, and also having them available for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our CAL FIRE reps.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted. My name's Abigail Strader. For those of you that don't know me, my area is the Inland Empire. So we have Riverside, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Monos. But I also will help Henry Herrera, who is our LA County rep. He usually gets a lot of grants in his area, so I'll take the load off of him and will help him for his area. And so basically what I wanted to talk about today for your plantings is the right tree, the right place. And that's plugged a lot in our program because it can solve a lot of problems for future regarding your tree planting. On the Southern California Edison page, there's actually a brochure that says the right tree, the right place, and it goes into a little bit more detail on that. It also will give good ideas for trees if there is no other place for you to plant other than planting under power lines. There's a list of tree species that would work underneath power lines. However, we like to discourage that as much as possible. And one of the careers I had before this was a utility forester for PG&E up north. So I like to make sure that people know when they're planting the tree, our trees grow, they'll grow tall. So look up, look around, look everywhere where your tree is going to grow and make sure that you are planting it in the right place. I am available for questions. If you have any species questions or anything regarding tree planting, I'm available to help out with that. I can give, let's see, how, I don't know if people can take screenshots, but I can make, let's see if it works. My card available. I don't know if it will focus it.
We can send the info out
Okay.
after too.
Yeah, but you're welcome to email me or call me. Email is the best option for me because then it gives me time to do a little research and get back to you on good species. And for this call, I'm available for any questions at the end if you need. Lynette, did you want to just get on and
Sure.
say hi?
Yeah.
We'll
I
switch
will.
places.
Yeah, I will. Hi, everybody. I'll do more than say hi. I have a couple things jotted down, sorry. Yeah, we're doing a little bit of multitasking today, but so, hi, I'm Lynette Short. I'm the regional urban forester for the San Diego, Imperial, and Orange regions, similar to Abigail, but just in a different area. So I'm excited that Relief asked us to join in. We usually get a lot of follow-up questions and everything, so we're not going over anything really specific here. It's just we were asked kind of the most important things that we would want people to know who may or may not be familiar with doing tree planting projects. It may not be your day-to-day. It's likely not your day-to-day. It's not many of us, but so the first thing that came to mind that I'd like to cover is just your basic tree planting practices and how important these little details are in order to have your project be a success and not have your trees fail. With a tree planting project in general, we expect a certain percentage of mortality, and it may not be due to your improper planting practices. It may just be there's a number of reasons why trees fail, but in general, if you follow proper best management practices, you should have a pretty successful rate. And we'd say like 10% mortality. So, 9 out of your 10 trees, if you were to plant 10 trees, probably should survive if you can follow these practices and hopefully get, a little stroke of luck that you can find some good stock at the nursery. Sometimes that's kind of challenging. So I just want to go over those basic things with you guys. So Abigail kind of covered right tree, right place. And it's kind of hard to describe that in this short period of time. So utilize her and reach out to her as far as asking questions about species and what are appropriate for certain areas, because everybody's going to have a different situation. But my focus here is a little bit more generalized, and it's not a case by case. It's these are our guidelines, and if you follow them, basically you'll have a little bit more success, and it's very small things. So what I was trying to do see, we don't use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams. Is there a feature to where we can load a document on the chat feature? And if not, then I can, Sarah, I already forwarded Sarah our planting specifications. What I realized today, Sarah, is so I had extracted those pages. I extracted too much, and we have our inventory appendix attached to that. So I'd like to
Oh.
resend it to you.
Yeah,
Go
go ahead.
And if you send it to the field, no big deal. And I'll do it when I am done talking because I can only multitask to a certain extent. And also just use the chat feature if you guys don't want to interrupt, because I tend to talk a lot and go on. Throw a question out there and Abby can field those for me. But so three main things is proper tree selection. And I'm not talking about species. I'm saying the quality of nursery stock that you're going to select is extremely important in the survivability of your trees. The proper actual planting technique that you use to get that tree in the ground. And then third one is your follow-up maintenance. That may all seem kind of over obvious, but these are where we see our trees fail all the time. It falls within those three categories. So we'll start with, and so the document that I was talking about has all this in detail included in this PDF document. It's CAL FIRE's planting guidelines, but it's not just CAL FIRE. It was put together over a number of years with a number of organizations, and it's kind of been our go-to document that hasn't changed a lot over the years because it's pretty tried and true, and it works. So that's the detail, and that's what Sarah, if anything, is going to share with you guys at the end. So I'm just kind of covering those basic things. So it starts out with nursery selection and your basics for what to look for, because it's so important. Here we're growing these organisms in a container, sometimes from seed, well, mostly from seed, but you don't see that part of it. You see the tree when it's been established for a couple of years and it's been transferred from a small container to a larger container. And eventually, maybe you're probably going to deal with about 5 to 15 gallon container stock is what you're going to be looking at. Anyways, just understand that these organisms that were meant to have all the space in the world are being grown in a confined area. And so that totally affects the way the tree grows, the tree's roots grow, and the structure of the tree. That guidance document shows you what to look for. It shows you what to look for as far as basic structure of the tree, and what to look for that's poor structure, and you just need to leave that tree alone. There's going to be plenty of those poorly structured trees at the nursery. You'd like to have faith that they're going to have all good stuff out there, but they're not. So just these little things will really make the difference in a healthy tree, or even just the survivability of a tree. So it's going to go over good structure, and I'm not going to describe that because it's kind of hard without graphics and everything. And then basic root structure. Obviously, roots are hard to look at because they're underground, but there are some things to look for that will definitely kill your tree if you choose a tree that has, for example, a girdling root. So sometimes the roots, because they're being confined and grown in a container, they tend to grow outwards, and when they hit the side of that container, they tend to circle. And those roots can circle back around the trunk of the tree and actually choke it out. And that we call that girdling roots. So these are all the little things that our guidance document will talk about to avoid. And just a little bit of digging down in the dirt can show you. So that's the basic part of it. And I'd like you guys to look at that document and read the detail of it. But picking out a good quality tree from the nursery or the wholesaler, wherever it is that you go, is really going to pay its dividends down the road if you pick a tree that's set up for success instead of set up for failure. So, and that's just the selection guidance for nursery stock. So the next section of the document goes into proper planting practices. It may seem simple, like just sticking a tree in the ground is pretty simple. It actually is, but a difference of an inch or two too high above ground level grade or below can easily kill your tree, and we see it all the time. So these are the things when we go out and we inspect a tree and we see one that failed, you go, okay, this is exactly what we're looking for. And 9 times out of 10, it's one of these factors. The nursery factors that I'm talking about, planting too high or too low, above grade. There is just this happy medium between allowing the tree roots to be able to breathe and take in that oxygen and not be suffocated with too much soil on top. But having it too high is not going to be good for them as well. They have to be able to establish themselves down under the ground. So there are actual graphics in this document that show you, you know, where you're going to want to be, and some tips. And I'd also encourage you guys, if you ever been to, you know, an Arbor Day event, and we're not obviously holding a lot of these things in person, but eventually that's gonna go away. But if there are this year, maybe in the fall, some in-person Arbor Day events, especially if CAL FIRE is involved or some other stakeholders, if Tree San Diego is there, for example, a lot of times we'll be asked to give a tree planting demo, and that's such a great opportunity. If you guys ever get to watch any of that, it's just neat little tips, and you gain a lot more in person sometimes. So I'd encourage that. So that's on the actual planting practices and proper planting out in the field and everything. You know, down to, and one more detail I'll talk about is digging your hole big enough. If you're planting in an area that has really tough and hard, dry soil, and it was really hard to dig that hole in the first place, that hole should be dug a lot bigger than you would think, so that when you backfill, you have softer soil that's more porous, and it gives those baby little roots that aren't that strong yet to have an opportunity to stretch out further past their crown, because essentially those roots are going to get much wider than their above the ground crown. So little things like that. So the last part of this guidance document, what we stress is, it's almost like the overly obvious one, is follow-up maintenance. Your trees need to be watered, and they need usually a little bit more than water and follow-up care, just keeping the weeds away from the bottom, maybe mulching and everything. But the biggie here is water. I can't tell you how many times I've seen trees fail, and you just realize, you know what, they haven't been watered in weeks. So there's no straightforward answer for what a tree requires, because it's species dependent. It's depending on your environmental factors around where the tree is being planted, and the soil as well type, and you won't know all those things. But I'm going to try and simplify it a little bit. In the first growing season, when that 15-gallon or even 5-gallon tree was planted, they require water 2 to 3 times a week, especially if you're planting in the spring, you know, Arbor Day season, and going into the summer. We're here in Southern California. I'm guessing all y'all are too in Southern California here. We have some hot, dry weather during the summer, so they do require a bit of watering. And when I talk about watering, this is deep watering, depending on the size of the root ball. You're looking at somewhere around at least 3 gallons. Deep watering is watering a whole bunch at once instead of little bits at a time. It's found to be more beneficial to the tree. The larger amount of water all at once allows the water to percolate further down into the root ball. And the comparison is, a lot of trees are planted in let's just say a lawn area. And then it's the lawn sprinkler system is what they're relying on to water that tree. It works sometimes, but what happens there in those situations is it's getting little bits of water at a time, and that water is not percolating all the way down the root ball. So when possible, it's best to do deep watering less frequently, just more water at a time. But in general, the guideline for the first growing season is 2 to 3 times per week, 3 to 5 gallons. Like I said, it's species dependent. We don't have a guidance document because it's a little too intricate to break it down per species. But I'm sure there are resources out there that can help you. I don't know, how in depth you guys want to get it, but the general guidelines that we have and that I'm talking about here are going to ensure your survivability with your trees. So let me think, where was I going to go with that? In the watering. Oh yeah, and that's another thing. So once you're out of that first growing season, we'll just say the first year of that tree, you can definitely back off the water. I think the common sense approach with this is, science can tell you all they want with, species and how much water they require. And if you're in this type of soil system, I wouldn't even go that far. It's more like, let's back off, one one tier here and see how that tree does over a period of time. So you're probably going, okay, I get this now. This is actually a lot of follow-up monitoring of these trees. And that's what it comes down to is let's do a little bit common sense approach. If the trees, if you visit the tree frequently enough, you know, one time per week, once every 2 weeks or so is maybe doable. I don't think you guys are, any of you are planting a large quantity of trees, so it could be doable. People can take turns on this, but watch those trees. And if you visit them frequently enough, you know what they're looking like. We're going to enter summertime, for example, they're going to get a little bit stressed. That's just how it is. And if they start to change and look a little bit of stress, maybe you ought to put a little bit of water on them. Maybe look and see if there's something that's sabotaging that tree. Do we have weeds that are growing at the base of the tree that are actually stealing some of their water and competing for the nutrients and everything? So if this is the first time you guys have heard these things, I can guarantee you're going, oh yeah, well, duh, that makes sense. You know, urban forestry is as complicated as it can be. Planting trees can be very simplified with just a little bit of due diligence and follow-up work and common sense. So those are the three things that I wanted to hit on for proper tree planting practices, follow-up, and choosing your trees. And these kind of things that I just breezed over, you can see in the document in more detail are going to, you know, it's going to make or break how well your trees survive. So that's what I wanted to hit.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, folks, please put questions in the chat. And Abby was able to attach that document in the chat, so you can download it.
Found it on the desktop. Okay.
We'll also send it out after.
Okay. See if I can pull up the chat.
There's nothing coming through yet. So while folks are thinking of things, I have a question. Okay. And you touched on how like people will probably be working with 5 to 15 gallon trees. Could you give some general pointers about, obviously it's a case by case thing, but what factors go into people deciding how big of a tree? Because that's something I've learned being new to the urban forestry world is it's like not necessarily always the bigger tree is going to be successful.
Definitely. So I mentioned 15-gallon trees because that's kind of generally what CAL FIRE suggests. It's a good bang for your buck size tree. It's established enough to where it's going to survive a little bit better out in an urban environment. 5-gallon tree, pretty small, and they're completely appropriate in maybe like a more like a restoration area or area that doesn't get a lot of foot traffic or anything. Your 15-gallon trees is kind of our go-to, and they're not very expensive. You can still plant that size stock by hand. And just for measure for you guys, a 15-gallon tree, the round container is going to be about yay wide and about this tall. I'm sorry, I can barely see myself. It's 15-gallon is actually misleading. It's not a 15-gallon container. It's a number 15, but everybody says 15-gallon. But it's somewhere around there as far as the size goes. When you bump up to the next size, so a lot of people go, oh, well, I want to do better than that. I think I might want to plant a 24. So your next size up is 24-inch box tree, and that's actually in a wooden box container. Now you're getting into a much more expensive tree, number one. Number two, nobody's planting those trees by hand. You need some heavy equipment to not only dig the hole, even that large, but to move those trees around. So that's where we stay away from those. Now, cities that we work with that have the resources, or even organizations with our grant projects on a case-by-case basis, we do approve. So it's not that we disapprove that size. It's just not the most cost-effective, and it's not easy for your average citizen. So that's why I'm talking about 15-gallon and 5-gallon trees. Another factor is what kind of size do you have? And overall, even if you plant a 5-gallon tree versus a 15-gallon tree, you should be looking at, do you have the space? Does the ground have the space? Does up where the crown of the tree is going to be, is there the space available? The other spacing thing I want to talk about, and there is, it's probably in our guidance document, I haven't looked at it in detail for a while, is where you're planting. Our minimum requirement for the CAL FIRE grants is that the ground needs to be open at least a minimum of 24 square feet. So a 4 by 6 foot area. And that may seem like overkill when you're talking about a very small tree. However, we're looking 40 years into the future of what this tree is going to require and need as far as oxygen. If you had that tree well area paved all the way up to, you know, just around the base of the tree's roots aren't going to get the water and get the oxygen back and forth through the soil. So that's something else that we consider. In very much older practices in heavy urban areas, you do see very small tree wells. I think we've turned the corner. I think I see a lot of old tree wells being expanded. We saw a lot of failure, and it's something that we've learned is that those tree wells need a lot of space. So parks, it's not an issue. Obviously, the only issue in parks is if you're planting, you know, right around turf, just to make sure that you keep that turf away from growing right up to the base of the tree. That's not a good thing for the tree in general. So, yeah. Did that cover that?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Oh, good. We just got a question in, and I'll just, before we answer that, just, yeah, feel free to put more in, either about trees specifically. If you even want to get into some of the projects you have in mind or sites, that's fine with me. We have time, and, you know, your specific questions about your projects might be useful to other people. Or if you have any questions about the grant and the reporting and the requirements, feel free to send those in too.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and address the question from Ryan. He's saying, in Southern California, we may be experiencing a drought. Are there any supplement, for example, mulch that can be used to help with their growth? So yes, yes and no. Mulch is helpful. It doesn't help with their growth. What the mulch does around the base of the tree is it helps maintain the moisture in the soil right at the base of the tree. It also a lot of times helps keep the weeds out, because the sun's not penetrating down to the soil to give that. So that is a practice that we do suggest. And I believe in our guidance document, it talks about how thick of a layer of mulch, because you can put too much, you likely won't. But it can't be, to be effective, it needs to be, you know, at least a couple inches deep. You know, I wouldn't read too much into this too, but mulch it's an organic material. So if you're watering that mulch, then a little bit of a minor amount of nutrients are, you know, leaching down to the roots. But like I said, don't read into that too much. The bigger benefit of the mulch is keeping the soil more moist and keeping the weeds down a little bit. Yeah.
Tree selection is the biggest.
Do you want to switch real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, Abby and I are going to switch you guys real quick.
Great.
We're shooting off.
One thing on Ryan's question also is tree selection is the best thing that you can do as far as our drought. I've seen areas in Southern California, Yucaipa is an example. We're a very dry climate there, and people plant coast redwoods. That's not a tree that is suggested down here in the name is coast, which implies that it's a better tree for the coast, for the ocean areas, or areas that get a higher amount of rainfall every year. So selecting a tree that can be drought tolerant, that would be my biggest suggestion as far as drought wise.
Yeah. Good point.
That makes sense. There's a comment about tree diapers as a option. Is that something you guys have used?
I've seen that, and actually, I think, was it Ken? Were you talking about using these? I think I've done a little bit of research on them. I think 1 or 2 of our grants have talked about using them or using them, but however, I haven't had any experience with them.
I've tried using them. They're the purpose of them is to kind of suck water out of the air and be able to be self-watering. So they're helpful, I think, in areas where you have greater amounts of rainfall. But in Southern California, in our area, we get about 20 inches of rain a year. It's not very helpful. There are other devices such as tree gators, portable tree irrigators, that fill up. The advantage of them is they can contain about 20 gallons of water in a very short period of time. So if you're trying to fill up your tree wells with water, this will allow to have 20 gallons, which is pretty much what you want to put on a tree in a week. That's helpful, but it's subject to vandalism and subject to problems with wild animals if you're in a more deserted area. There's a couple different varieties of those in addition to tree gators. Are called, there's some different varieties of them, but all basically the same principle is you have to get water to them and fill them up back again. The tree diaper, you don't have to fill it up as much, but if you don't have rainfall to fill it up, it's not as helpful.
Thanks, Ken.
I have seen instances where the tree gators are used, and for people that don't know, the tree gators they have a donut like one. It's basically like an inner tube type thing that you fill up with water and it slowly drips into the soil. And then there's ones that look like kind of a tent that go around the base of the tree. And again, it's a good option if you don't have irrigation on the tree and you want to get it established the first couple of years, but it's definitely not a long-term deal. And I mean, a lot of when we do our plantings, the summers that follow get really hot, and it's very important for the trees to have water. So if these are last resort things, I would suggest them. Yeah.
Also, be careful on a hillside. They don't work as well,
Yeah.
particularly the ones that are the donut shape, because they depend upon gravity to get the water out. And if your holes are on the upper end of the donut, they don't empty. Experience.
That's great. And Lynette's putting contact information in the chat, and thank you. And we'll send that out too. And as far as going back to just the grant itself, I forgot to mention that community outreach has often been a big part of these grants. You know, they were designed to celebrate Arbor Week, which is this week, in their communities. And then we've kind of just extended that instead of it having to be during Arbor Week to the spring or fall, just to give everyone more time to do projects. And that's obviously going to be a lot different this year with COVID, but we look forward to seeing what ways you all can be creative about engaging your communities, either with social distancing or online events. And I thought of it when Lynette mentioned like tree planting demonstrations. That could be a really cool thing to do, where you video it and live stream it or something like that. So just wanted to plant that seed as far as if any ways that you can be doing education and sharing a lot of this information about tree best practices with your communities. That will be great for helping celebrate trees. And so, yeah, is there any other questions? People can unmute yourselves or put them in the chat. If not, we can be done a little bit early too. Ken, anything else come to your mind that you think is useful to share? One of Ken's top tips? Not to put you on the
Well,
spot.
we're trying something a little different. We're going to try to, in addition to a tree planting project, we're going to try to work with local schools to develop the tree K-12 program at one of our schools with the Arbor Day Foundation, and to try to develop an ongoing program. So we're going to focus more on like one school and try to get that program going. And if that works there, then we'll try to expand that to other schools. So it's a way of kind of, getting everybody prepped so that by the time we do get ready to plant, and we're going to plant sometime in October just before our deadline, just so that we can get the schools ready. And by that time, hopefully, we'll have herd immunity or something close to it where we can get out there and get our volunteers out working with them again.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, folks, for just that timeline, in the summer it does get really hot. So our intent with having it go till mid-October is that either you plant now in the spring when it's cool, or and if not, wait till the fall. There's no rush. Like Amelia kind of set up, our priority is the long-term success of these trees and these projects. So definitely chat with us if that's ever a concern within the grant guidelines.
One other thing, if I can add, if in terms of tree selection, I don't think we mentioned select tree, but
Yes.
that is your go-to for identifying different types of trees that work. If you're not familiar with it, I think there are links to, well, just Google it, select tree.
Yeah, thank you. We'll send that out as well. It's a great tool for narrowing by, how many different categories? 30 different, 50 different,
Oh,
as
I
far
think
as,
there's over 50 different,
yeah.
And probably it's increased.
Yeah, the height
Yeah.
of the tree, the climate, the type of leaves, anything you can think of. Amelia just put it in the chat. So that's a great thing. I will say I've used it before, and you find some great tree, but then, it's so rare that you can't find it anywhere. So they do have a nursery connection on that too, where then you can find out if it's something you can access. Yeah, Ryan commented about being interested in schools. Ryan, you worked with a school district last year for your Arbor Week grant, right? So that's something that we're looking into at California Relief too. So you'll hear more from us at some point. We really want to have more conversations and resources about working with schools. It's definitely a big need, and
I
it's
think
a
he
lot of
was
land.
specifically interested in the program that Ken's doing. I think he
Right.
was a follow-up. Yeah. So Ken, could you give us maybe a link to what you're working with the Arbor Day Foundation?
Well, in the Arbor Day Foundation, it has various levels of program awards. One is the Tree City USA programs for cities. And then they had the Tree Campus USA program, which was essentially for universities. And then they realized, we could expand this out. So they broke it down into other categories. And then they have a category of higher learning campus award. And then they have a kindergarten through 12 award program. Essentially, it's the same principle involved, meets certain criteria, 4 or 5 different criteria. You can Google that, or at least look at that through the Arbor Day Foundation website.
That's a great resource. Thank you. All right, well, we will just go ahead and wrap up early. I'm going to stop recording now. And if anyone has any questions, they just want to ask.